Let's get right into it. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we are going under the hood of Ecuador's absolute stunner, that 2-1 upset over Germany. We're going to break down the tactics, extract some highly actionable scouting insights for coaches and analysts, and figure out how a team that nobody gave a chance completely subverted expectations on the pitch. Look, this result wasn't just a lucky fluke, right? Analysts across the board are calling it a genuine masterclass in resilience and tactical discipline against elite opposition. It's exactly why we love this game, the sheer unpredictability. And it was a monumental win, securing Ecuador their first knockout stage appearance since way back in 2006. Think of today's Explainer as your tactical syllabus. We're going to move fast, covering the initial shock of the result, profiling Ecuador's defensive anchors, how they neutralized the German machine, the mental resilience they showed, what this means for Germany's exposed vulnerabilities, and finally, whether this is a viable blueprint going forward.
So let's kick things off with Section 1 and contextualize the sheer magnitude of this tactical shock.
To really appreciate this 2-1 scoreline, you have to remember where Ecuador was just days prior. Coming into this match, they looked, well, completely toothless. They suffered a painful late loss to Ivory Coast, and then they only managed to draw against Curaçao. I mean, they fired off 15 shots in that game without finding the back of the net even once. Hopes were rock bottom. For them to turn around and pull off a 2-1 victory against a tournament favorite, it's nothing short of extraordinary. And when you track the actual progression of the match, you see the true extent of Ecuador's fortitude. Things started disastrously. They conceded a highly controversial penalty in just the second minute. But instead of folding, they roared right back. By the 9th minute, Angulo fired home an absolute screamer to equalize. And then late in the game, Gonzalo Plata scores the dramatic winner, punishing a massive, uncharacteristic blunder by Manuel Neuer. Total reversal of fortune. Moving into our second section, let's profile the defensive anchors that actually made this comeback possible.
This whole performance was built on a rock-solid foundation and is defined by one crucial number, 5. That is the astonishingly low number of goals Ecuador conceded across their entire grueling 18-match CONMEBOL qualifying campaign. Just 5 goals, and only 4 of those were from open play. That stat alone tells you everything you need to know about how brutally difficult this team is to break down. If you're a tactical scout right now, you are absolutely drooling over this defensive core. It's anchored by center backs Willian Pacho and Piero Hincapié, elite players who, by the way, literally just faced off against each other in a Champions League final, and then sitting right in front of them is Moisés Caicedo, operating as the ultimate midfield shield. Elite ball recovery, elite awareness, it's a terrifying triangle of solidity. And this defense is battle-tested. In qualifiers, they finished second in CONMEBOL, behind only Argentina. Along the way, they actually defeated Argentina 1-0. They beat a highly attacking Colombia side despite getting a red card in the 34th minute, and they went completely unbeaten at home. This isn't just a team on a lucky streak, it's an elite, tournament-ready wall.
Now, let's look at how that foundation translated on the pitch in Section 3, Neutralizing the German Attack.
The contrast between expectation and reality here was staggering. Germany had already qualified, sure, but Julian Nagelsmann fielded essentially his full-strength starting 11, making only one change, because he wanted to maintain match sharpness and momentum. But instead of high tactical intensity, the output was just flat, undynamic. And on the rare occasions they did manage attacking transitions, star players like Leroy Sané were missing clean one-on-one chances.
Pundits completely nailed the issue with this sentiment. When you look at a starting lineup featuring highly touted offensive superstars like Florian Wirtz, Jamal Musiala, Leroy Sané, and Kai Havertz, you expect fireworks. Instead, a shocking lack of creative fluidity. Germany just couldn't find the answers to unlock the Ecuadorian puzzle. And how did Ecuador do it? They used an incredibly disciplined low block. Now, we all know what a low block is. You drop deep, absorb the pressure, and severely restrict the space. But Ecuador didn't just passively defend. They actively choked passing lanes and completely neutralized Germany's attacking transitions. They suffocated the space guys like Musiala need to operate, turning the German attacking machine into a totally blunt sword. Masterclass in spatial control.
We also have to talk about the psychological element here, which brings us to Section 4, Overcoming the Officiating Controversy.
Remember that second-minute penalty awarded to Germany for a high boot? It was widely condemned by pundits as a scandalous decision, an utter head-scratcher that VAR didn't step in and overturn. Usually, going down 1-0 that early to a powerhouse on a bad call that breaks a team's spirit entirely.
But instead of collapsing, Ecuador responded immediately. Equalizing just 7 minutes later showcased exactly the kind of staggering mental fortitude that tactical scouts covet. You can draw up the best tactics in the world on a whiteboard, but if your players lose their heads after a bad call, none of it matters. Ecuador kept their focus brilliantly.
Now, Ecuador's success forces us to critically evaluate the opposition. So, Section 5, Germany's vulnerabilities exposed.
Let's talk about the center-back pairing of Nico Schlotterbeck and Jonathan Tah, because the scouting critique here is harsh. They looked absolutely ragged out there, devoid of confidence, and crucially, their stylistic profiles just do not complement each other, especially when they have to deal with pace. Every time Ecuador countered, the German backline looked incredibly shaky.
To really grasp how poorly Germany defended, consider this fact. During that entire 18-match qualifying campaign, Ecuador scored a meager 14 goals. To put that into perspective for you, that is actually fewer goals than non-qualifier Venezuela scored. This proves Germany's defense didn't just struggle, they completely crumbled against a team that is historically allergic to putting the ball in the net.
Which brings us to our final analytical section. Is this a blueprint for success?
This is the central question for every single coach and scout watching this explainer right now. Can a pure, defensively minded low block actually survive deep into the high-stakes knockout stages of a major tournament? We've seen it cause massive upsets, sure, but can it carry a team all the way to a trophy?
The ripple effects here are huge. For Germany, the ragged defense now has to face Paraguay and then potentially France. The terrifying prospect for German fans is wondering how Schlotterbeck and Tah will possibly handle Kylian Mbappe's pace. On the flip side, if Ecuador keeps this up, they might be staring down a knockout match against England. And let's be real, Ecuador's frustrating, disciplined wall is exactly the type of setup that historically gives highly favored English squads absolute nightmares.
But here's the crucial takeaway. While Ecuador is incredibly hard to break down, they do lack a cutting edge. Relying entirely on defensive heroics and massive opponent blunders, like that Neuer mistake, might ultimately cap their ceiling. Against hyperclinical teams that simply do not make those mistakes, transitioning solely through errors is a really risky long-term strategy.
So, I'll leave you with this final provocative thought to ponder. Will this defensive masterclass be the blueprint that continues to shatter expectations in this tournament? Or will an undeniable lack of offensive cutting edge ultimately send Ecuador packing? It's a fascinating tactical dilemma, and I honestly can't wait to see how it unfolds. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep your eyes peeled as the knockout stages begin.